Several nations demanded on Tuesday the lifting of the U.S. blockade on Cuba before the United Nations General Assembly. Hurricane Melissa leaves Jamaica as a powerful Category 4 storm. And on Monday, during the ordinary session of the National Assembly of Venezuela, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago was declared persona non grata. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. On Tuesday morning, the 21st plenary meeting of the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly considered the resolution necessity of ending the economic, commercial and financial blockade imposed by the United States against Cuba. Several representatives of the international community reiterated the rejection of the blockade, which has been characterized as a violation of international law and the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. Since 1992, the United Nations has consecutively approved resolutions calling for an end to the blockade. This is the 34th time Cuba has presented such a resolution to the international organization. However, the United States rejected these claims, intensifying the economic oppression on the island. The resolution will be put to a vote by United Nations member states tomorrow, October 29th. Before the United Nations vote on the U.S. embargo against Cuba, Washington's representatives once again spread lies about the nature and intention of its coercive policy against Cuba. The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, repeated the discredited arguments that Washington usually uses to justify sanctions condemned year after year by the international community. With the pretext of correcting misinformation, Waltz repeated statements that do not withstand confrontation with the facts or with the current U.S. legislation. The U.S. diplomat not only lied, but also tried to divert the central issue and attack the dignity of the Assembly and the member states. And in this context, in the use of the right to point of order, the Cuban foreign minister interrupted the U.S. representative to provide a strong response to his address.
61 and 68 of the rules. The permanent representative of the United States is not only lying, substantively deviating from the subject, but is also grossly and expressing against his president, against the dignity of the Assembly and the member states. He is doing so in an uncivilized, crude and gross way that is not acceptable in this democratic forum. Mr. Waltz, this is the United Nations General Assembly. It is not a signal chat, nor is it the House of Representatives.
In this regard, on a special interview for teleSUR, the Cuban Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bruno Rodriguez, referred to the slanders made by the U.S. in his speech before the United Nations General Assembly.
I felt obliged to interrupt the speech of the permanent representative of the United States. I had barely just arrived here to this General Assembly because the way he spoke was with great disrespect towards the President of the UN General Assembly, towards all member states. He referred to the UN General Assembly as a political theater. He said that the state members confess in private that they want to do something else. He, besides slandering and saying lies, he lacked any civility, lack of the basic protocol that is called upon to any diplomatic representative in this important national General Assembly.
In addition, the Cuban foreign minister referred to the threat posed by the United States military deployment in the Caribbean.
Well, I spoke on our strong rejection on the threat that the U.S. government is creating against peace, security, and stability in the region and also in the world. It's a military deployment that we know that it doesn't work to face scourges like drug trafficking, but it constitutes an existential threat against the independence of Venezuela and all other nations of our region, against sovereignty of all states.
In this scenario, Venezuela reinforced its solidarity with Cuba and took the opportunity to further denounce the U.S. military deployment in the Caribbean waters.
A criminal blockade was imposed against the sisterly Republic of Cuba, a free, independent and sovereign nation that is a fully fledged member of this General Assembly. The blockade continues to wreak devastating losses and damage exceeding $5 billion a year. It continues to wreak huge suffering in terms of health, education, access to energy and food. The cumulative effects of the economic suffocation imposed from outside for generations is equivalent to the destruction resulting from a war, because the blockade is an act of economic war, one which seeks to subjugate through hunger, sickness and death an entire people. That is the truth that people seek to hide when they call this crime a simple policy measure. In recent weeks, the United States of America has waged a series of massacres against civilians traveling in small vessels in the Caribbean Sea. In so doing, they've sowed terror among the coastal populations of several countries in the region. A few minutes ago, we learned that 4 new attacks had just been waged in the Pacific Ocean. That news was just released a few moments ago. Extrajudicial killings are acts which occur and then their perpetrators claim responsibility for them with total impunity. At the same time, they threaten more political killings, acts of sabotage and invasions of other countries.
Also, the permanent representative of Colombia for the United Nations, Leonor Salavata, denounces the inclusion of Cuba as a country sponsor of terrorism.
The unjust and unilateral inclusion of Cuba on the list of state sponsors of terrorism constitutes an unjustified measure that is aggravating the effects of the embargo and which ignores its historic contribution to peace. And Colombia can attest to that. Cuba has been a fundamental actor in the pursuit of peace in our country, playing a central role in the achievement of the final peace agreement in 2016 between the government and the FARC-EP, and also supporting its implementation, particularly the processes relating to the ceasefire, disarmament, demobilization, and the reintegration of ex-combatants.
For his part, the permanent representative of Barbados to the United Nations on behalf of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, Francois Jackman, also positioned against the U.S. blockade on the nation.
The unilateral economic, commercial, and financial embargo imposed by the United States of America against the Republic of Cuba remains a clear violation of the UN Charter and international law. For more than 3 decades, the General Assembly, guided by the Charter, has spoken with clarity and consistency. This embargo must end. CARICOM therefore deeply regrets that despite the near universal calls of the international community, the embargo continues.
In addition, the permanent representative of Antigua and Barbuda emphasized that the blockade hinders Cuba from achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
A time when the world has committed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, we are all already off track. The people of Cuba will remain unfairly left behind as long as this coercive measure persists. The embargo undermines the very promise that all member states made to leave no one behind.
On behalf of the non-aligned movement, the permanent representative of Uganda to the United Nations referred to the spirit of solidarity and internationalism of Cuba.
By the genuine spirit of solidarity and humanism, Cuba's contributions in the fields of health, education, and other vital sectors have touched and transformed countless lives, even in the most challenging circumstances. The movement rejects any unilateral coercive measures that are not in accordance with international law and the Charter of the United Nations, or attempts to hinder such noble endeavors for political or other reasons, and reiterates its firm call for the immediate and unconditional lifting of the embargo.
Also, at the United Nations General Assembly, the permanent representative of Russia affirmed that the United States sanctions against Cuba constitute a violation of national sovereignty.
Washington's unilateral restrictive measures against Havana are a gross violation of the fundamental principles and norms of international law, and they undermine cooperation in the fight against global challenges. The sanctions war unleashed by the United States against Cuba to achieve its main aim, the overthrow of a government they don't favor, is a clear example of perfidious interference in the internal affairs of an independent state.
Also in this context, on behalf of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, the representative of Singapore, Burhan Ghafoor, urged the United States to lift the blockade against Cuba and to remove the island from the list of countries that sponsor terrorism.
ASEAN joins the other members of this assembly in reiterating our call for the United States to lift its unilateral economic, commercial, and financial embargo against Cuba as soon as possible, and to delist Cuba as a state sponsor of terrorism.
And now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Melissa leaves Jamaica as a Category 4 hurricane. With winds of 298 kilometers per hour, Melissa is expected to reach the southeastern region of Cuba on Wednesday morning, with maximum sustained winds near 280 kilometers per hour. Previous to the landfall, the hurricane left 3 people dead in Jamaica, while Haiti has registered 5 deaths and 1 casualty was accounted for in the Dominican Republic. Melissa is the most powerful hurricane to hit the region since Hurricane Gilbert in 1988 and threatens to cause extensive damage to infrastructure. And also, Melissa has prompted the evacuation of over 650,000 citizens in the eastern part of Cuba as it nears the island as a potentially devastating Category 5 hurricane. The Cuban Civil Defense General Staff declared the eastern provinces of Guantánamo, Santiago de Cuba, Holguín, Granma, Las Tunas, and Camagüey on alarm phase, while Ciego de Ávila and Santi Espíritus were put in alert phase as the weather event's path is closely monitored. In this context, Cuban authorities have instructed the evacuation of over 650,000 citizens in flood-prone areas across the forecast-affected provinces, urging the population to stay informed about the advances and development of the hurricane and to comply with the civil defense instructions. And at least 26 people were injured when they were reacted in panic to the collapse of several buildings following a 6.1 magnitude earthquake west of Turkey. According to the authorities' report, citizens were injured after jumping out of windows or running away in a hurry in the province of Balıkesir. In this regard, Turkish Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya assured that there were no fatalities after the earthquake that occurred on Monday night, and in this context and on the instructions of the government, teams from the Provincial Directorate of the Environment, Urbanization and Climate Change remain deployed to assess the damage caused while removing debris in the affected areas. And on Tuesday, 3 Palestinians were killed by Israeli forces during an attack on the occupied West Bank city of Jenin. Israeli occupation forces stormed the town of Kafr Qud, west of Jenin, with military reinforcements surrounding a site on agricultural lands and firing live ammunition at the young man. The Gazan Ministry of Health informed the bodies of the murdered were seized, reporting that Israeli occupation forces also shelled a vehicle in the same location, setting it on fire. In this context, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement condemned the assassination, calling it part of a continued pattern of criminal aggression across the occupied West Bank and warning that the occupation's military escalation reflects the regime's deepening brutality and disregard for Palestinian lives. And in other news, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appeared in the Tel Aviv District Court to continue his testimony in the ongoing corruption trial against him. On Tuesday, District Court judges approved Netanyahu's request to shorten his testimony. The Israeli Prime Minister is the first incumbent leader to testify as a defendant in a criminal trial in the country. Netanyahu must respond during his appearances before the court to charges of fraud, breach of trust, and accepting bribes in 3 separate cases. In September 2025, the court decided to increase the number of weekly hearings to expedite the process due to repeated delays in the trial, which began in 2020. And we have a second show break coming up. Before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. On a show break, we'll be right back. Welcome back to From the South. On Monday, during the ordinary session of the National Assembly of Venezuela, the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago was declared persona non grata. In this regard, the President of the National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, and several deputies rejected the actions of the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Kamla Persad Bisesar, for aligning with the U.S. government's intentions to attack Venezuela. Furthermore, the participants denounced the escalation of hostilities by the government of the United States against the country during the present year. These actions have been repudiated by the vast majority of peoples around the world and in a resounding manner by the Venezuelan people, who remain firm in their defense of their independence, dignity, and self-determination. And in this sense, protests continue in several states of the country in defense of national sovereignty and also in rejection of the imperialist war threats of the United States in the Caribbean. With these live images from the Miranda state, Venezuelan protesters described the actions of Trinidad and Tobago Prime Minister Kamla Persad Bisesar as provocative, who expressed her support for Washington's military deployment in waters near the coast of Venezuela under the pretext of combating drug trafficking. People also denounced the intentions of the CIA, which intends to carry out a false flag operation in the Trinidad with the aim of justifying an intervention in Venezuela. In this regard, the participants expressed their support for the Bolivarian government and the policies of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro. In other news, the Chinese government urged the United States to stop its attempts to undermine peace and stability in the Caribbean region. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Yaqiun said he was aware of the statement by the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, in which former leaders reiterated their anti-war position and confirmed their concern about the United States military deployment against Venezuela. The Chinese spokesperson also urged Washington to abandon its warfare and intentions to destabilize the Caribbean region and to seek to return to the path of judicial cooperation. And now we go to Brazil, where a police operation against drug trafficking in Rio de Janeiro left at least 60 people dead and 81 arrested. According to local officials, the operation was part of an effort against drug trafficking and organized crime called Operation Containment. Authorities said that the Comando Vermelho gang, also known as the Red Command, was one of the primary targets and described the operation as the largest ever targeting that group. Police have implemented restrictions in different parts of the metropolitan region of Rio de Janeiro, while all military police units remain on alert for possible retaliation by the criminal group. The raid has become the single most lethal police operations in local history. And in other information, during the third Minsk International Conference on Russian Security, Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko outlined the country's key proposals for the peace agenda. The head of state presented 4 proposals summarizing Belarus's commitment to promoting peace. Lukashenko's proposal focused on prohibiting sanctions on food and medicine, protecting critical international infrastructure, offering solutions to the migration crisis, and taking measures in the field of artificial intelligence. In addition, the Belarus leader emphasized that 80 years after the formation of the United Nations, it is crucial for international organizations to fulfill their mission of providing solutions to global issues. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us in social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.